Hi, sixth graders. This week, week 6, is going to be a music history week. So there is not going to be any um, recording due to be submitted. Instead, there's going to be a little bit of reading, and there's going to be a quiz at the end of the week. And you have to watch this video, obviously. And then there's one little activity sheet to do as well. In the meantime, you should be practicing whatever your Suzuki piece is for next week, because that'll have to be submitted next week. And if you look on the calendar, there's a calendar for upcoming weeks that will tell you what you should be working on, or shoot me an email. The first thing you should do, and if you haven't done this, you should probably pause this video, look for this sheet. It says Music History in 6th Grade Orchestra, and it says Music History Notes. So if you need to, pause the video right now and go ahead and you can bring it up on your screen. It's a Word document and you can fill it in. Or if you feel better about it, you can print it out and you can write on it. Depends on how well you work with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, I'm going to teach it the way I normally do. You can come back and watch this as many times as you want. And when you feel comfortable with it, you can go ahead and take the quiz. When you take the quiz, please don't have the answers in front of you. We just got to ask for you to be honest. All right, so music history in 6th grade orchestra. This year in orchestra, we discussed the Baroque period. Now, a lot of people pronounce that different ways. I always say it's like the Baroque Obama period. So, which obviously we don't pronounce it like that either, but it's a one way of remembering what time period we're talking about. This Baroque time period lasted from 1600 until 1750. Now, that's a long period of time. There wasn't a lot of travel going on in Europe, so a lot of people weren't being influenced by each other. So that same type of music existed for a long time. Now, people who were writing Baroque style compositions obviously didn't live for 150 years. Okay, we started transitioning into this particular style around 1600. It was a nice cutoff date. And we ended it when Bach died. Now we're going to talk about Bach, but he died in 1750. So those were nice, even cutoff numbers. I don't think the people who lived during that time said, this is exactly when it started, this is exactly when it ended. But music historians looking back and listening to the music that was produced during those times said these are nice cutoffs to recognize or to talk about a particular style of music. Okay, the term Baroque means ornamented or fancy or highly decorated. It was borrowed from architecture. Music of the Baroque period is very complicated and busy. It's like trying to talk or listen to many people talking at the same time. Musicians of the day often made up music as they played it. This is called improvisation or improvising. We don't do that so much anymore, except in one particular style, which is jazz. And we do also do it at the end of concertos. We have something called a cadenza, where the soloist, gets to make up what we're doing. So the Baroque style was very fancy. When you looked at their castles or their houses, they liked gold and they liked sparkly and they blinged things up and they had mirrors, and their clothes, they were just fancy. Now, these were the rich people, of course. Okay, speaking of rich people, Baroque period musicians worked for their patrons. Okay, so if you patronize a store, you are buying something from the store. So patrons could pay money for them to write music for them. Okay. They were most often royalty or wealthy merchants. And additionally, the one establishment that had lots and lots of money, plus lots and lots of need for music each week, was the church. Okay. All right. During this time, there's another section here. It's called singing. Two popular types of vocal music appeared during the Baroque period. They were operas, which you may have heard of, and oratorios, which you may not have heard of, though they're very similar. So an opera is a piece of music, a work of music that tells a story. It's acted out. There is no speaking. People dress up. They have props. They have scenery. They tell a story through that. So it's like a play, it's like a musical, but you never speak any of the words. An oratorio is less fancy. And the way I remember that word is I call it a boratorio because it's a boring opera. Now, truly, it's not a boring opera, but more often it was Bible stories, so they were religious stories, and it was performed all in singing, but um, it wasn't performed with scenery, with props, with decorations and costumes and things like that. So a more of a boring opera. Okay, the person we'll talk about it in a minute, but one of the people who we are going to talk about, we're going to talk about three composers, and one of them specialized in that. So during the Baroque period, instrumental music was being written and played for its own sake, not just to accompany dances or singing. During this period, the chamber orchestra was organized, consisting of a number of instrumentalists who all performed his or her own part, probably his. So a chamber is a room. So a chamber orchestra is small enough to fit in a room, but additionally, generally you have one person on a part. Okay, we have chamber orchestra at school, and chamber is smaller than the full orchestra. Up until that part, we had troubadours, and we had people playing the lute and singing, or we had people playing the harp and singing. And this was music for music, so it wasn't necessarily to accompany a singer, and it was a smaller group of people. All right, so on the flip side, or on the second page, it says who was writing music during the Baroque period. The three most famous composers who lived during the Baroque period are Bach, Handel, and Vivaldi. Though they all lived during the same time period, their jobs were very, very different. So the first one, Bach was a church organist and a choir director in Germany. So remember when we said the church had a lot of money and they had a lot of need for music. So he would conduct the choir in church. He would write the music for the church services. He taught lessons. He had 20 kids. He had two wives, not at the same time, but one died and then he married another one. He had 20 kids. And when you think about it, when you remember Bach and you try and remember what his job was, if he had 20 kids, he needed a very stable job that he could support all of those kids. So he worked for a church. There were times when he went off and he did some other things, but generally his position was with the church. He was an organist and a choir director. All right, Vivaldi. Now, if you listen to that name, it almost sounds Italian. Vivaldi was a music director at an orphanage in Italy. So he had studied to be a priest, and sometimes they called him the Red Priest because he had red hair. But he ended up being a music director at a girls' orphanage in Italy. And so he was teaching these girls to play these beautiful pieces. They were all about your age, probably a little bit younger to a little bit older, and some fantastic music. And there's some more information in one of the readings. All right. And then the last slot is Handel wrote many large vocal works while living in England. And for anyone who has started Suzuki Book 2, that's for violins and violas, the first song is called Chorus from Judas Maccabeus. So that's a Bible story about the Maccabees. And Handel wrote this, and it was a chorus from this oratorio, which means everybody got to sing all together. It wasn't a solo, it was the full chorus singing. So that's kind of interesting. So Handel actually was born in Germany, and he ended up going to England, and he was kind of a rock star for the time period. So the last bit here for you to listen to, or to try and remember, 3 things you might hear when listening to Baroque music. Okay, this keyboard instrument was commonly used during the Baroque period. At that point, we didn't have our typical piano. So what we think of as the piano was actually a harpsichord. So it sounded a little more string-like. So we're plucking those strings instead of hammering down on the strings. There was no way to adjust the volume on there, and I'll see if I can find a like a clip for you to hear the difference between a harpsichord and a piano. Okay. Number two, blank were used to make the music fancier or decorated. So ornaments were used. And again, if you have played in the Suzuki books and you have played some of the minuets, you'll see little teeny tiny notes where we say they don't get actually any amount of time. You do them as fast as you can. They decorate the notes. Pretend you were decorating a Christmas tree. So you put ornaments on a Christmas tree. Is it still a tree if you didn't put ornaments on it? Of course it is. It's just fancier if you put decorations on it. Now, if you had a shirt that was plain, that didn't have any decorations on it, would it still be a shirt? Yes. But if you put decorations on it, it's going to be fancier. And because these people liked fancy, they added some ornaments or some decorations that people would understand how to do. And we'll see some of those in our Suzuki books. Okay, so ornaments were used to make the music fancier or decorated. All right. When you hear two or more lines of music at the same time, it's called counterpoint. All right. So I always say this for the violas and the cellos. Later on, music changes so that you don't get as much of the melody and the violins get the melody. But at this point, people liked to write counterpoint, which meant that you had two melodies kind of playing on top of each other and playing around each other, or might have even been more. So you are more likely in Baroque style music to have a melody that flows between parts of the orchestra and doesn't just solely live in the violin part. So, okay, so hopefully that answers all of your questions. Go ahead, fill that out. In this folder also, there are 3 readings. There's a reading on Bach, there's a reading on Vivaldi, and there's a reading on Handel. And there are 3 fun activity sheets as well. So one for Bach, one for Handel, and one for Vivaldi. I would like you to do one of those. So I would like you to do the reading on Bach and the activity sheet on Bach. And then you can submit the activity sheet. Okay. I am not sure if I can make it as a Word document. So you may have to take a picture of it or just write your answers in as a Word document. The quiz needs to be done by Friday. And good luck. All right. Thanks. Email me with any questions.